Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. I'm Randy Wright, and I'll be your captain on this solo flight special edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, this will be the final boarding call, so if you please, claim your seats, fasten your seatbelts, kick back, relax, and enjoy the show while I go ahead and delve into the pre-flight checklist, as there really is a lot of news and information to get to before I may fully indulge you with your in-flight entertainment. Well, folks, Trump is notorious for his abrasive personality. It is what he has used to attract many of his most ardent and vocal followers to him. They viewed this as a form of being a straight shooter, and this led them to conclude that Trump knows how to fight the so-called establishment, and they thought that this meant that he'd be willing to fight for them. But what we see coming into focus now that we're some 60-some-odd days or more into his first term in office, and maybe his only term in office, we don't really know yet, what we see come to the limelight time and again is that he not only walks back from the great multitude of promises that he's made to the electorate that ushered him in, he's also started to take sides with the so-called establishment wing, what we refer to here at Radio Aviation Excellence the Wright Flyer as the detente wing of the guntless opposition party, or GOP. And this is nowhere more certain than in the issue of the so-called repeal and replace of the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, what is known in the common American vernacular as Obamacare. You see, folks, what this all ties down to, and what it all boils down to, is that Trump is not the man that he claimed to be when he went in front of the rank and file of the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media and utilized them in such a way as to push forward with his narrative, and that he was never truly serious about being a conservative. And this should come as no surprise to anyone, because for the vast majority of his 70 years spent here on God's green earth, Donald J. Trump has espoused and has aligned himself with radical, frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist positions. Now, as my first officer Jeremy Grapington and I have oft-times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence the Wright Flyer, one does not just suddenly magically overnight change their political persuasion or their political beliefs and views. But that is what so many of those who have fallen victim to a cult of personality surrounding the 45th president of these United States of America want us to believe. That's what they said time and again, all throughout the primary process, and then throughout the general election process, as they attempted to foist a tyranny of false unity down our throats and completely against our will. It's something that we cannot ignore. It's something that works to the great detriment of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people. You see, what does it mean when we see this come to the forefront time and again, where there is just this unwillingness to accept reality, to accept the truth, and to call the man what he is? Well, it has to do with this notion of the seduction of victory at all costs. So many people were just so sick and tired of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, falling to successive failures in presidential election cycles, particularly 08 and 12, against Barack Hussein Obama, who should have been one of the weakest Democrat contenders in the relatively brief yet illustrious history of these United States of America. The problem is that the detente wing of the gutless opposition party loathes and despises conservatives. They view us as an embarrassment. They view us as an impediment to their overarching goal and dark and twisted machinations, which is to make the Republican Party the Me Too party of socialism. And in that end goal, they have been highly successful. This is what they have been trying to achieve. Think back to Bob Dole in '96. Think also of McCain and Romney. These men are not what I would call conservatives. In fact, I have a feeling that the vast majority of you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, also do not believe that these men were conservative, or do not believe that these men were looking out for our best interests. Well, that's what's come to the forefront. That is what has become a new established norm within the American system of polity, and it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. It's because the detente wing is doing everything in their power to distance and divorce themselves from the conservative message that has been at the heart of the Republican Party for about 53 years. Because we saw the great renaissance or the great resurgence of a conservative movement with Barry Goldwater in 1964. Now, Goldwater himself was not that much of a conservative, but that was the first time since the dark and twisted days of Herbert Hoover in 1929 and the rise of the Great Depression that conservatism had a way of coming back to the forefront. That conservatism finally began to be seen as a viable option. And it's unfortunate that it took that long. And we are facing a similar type of scenario unfurling before our eyes this very day. And again, it's going to take us paying attention to all of this. But the problem that arises with respect to Trump is that he recently started aligning himself with the establishment, particularly on the issue of the so-called American Health Care Act. That's the gutless opposition party, or GOP's, attempt to replace Obamacare. Now, folks, it does not need to be replaced. It is an unconstitutional bill, and we have stated that so many times on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. The problem is that we've gotten away from strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution, and that has been working to our great detriment overall. But here's the thing. None of this bodes well for those who supported him and followed him, thinking that his populist positions would be a strength to the movement and would help bring about real change. That is drastically needed in the upper echelons of our federal government. But we all heard the line that people decided to throw their support behind Trump because he's a political outsider. His followers have convinced themselves that Trump would beat down the so-called establishment, using the power of his personality to overcome his opposition. Now, here's an interesting thing. Matt Drudge recently made an appearance on Michael Savage's radio program where he tried to say that Trump is great, but opened his segment of answering callers' questions by admitting that some of Trump's problems are of his own making. And folks, this is so big that I want you to hear it from Drudge himself, just because it's one of those things that comes to the epicenter and needs to be addressed. So I'm going to go ahead and cue that up now.
Savage, 77 WABC.
I do think there is a crisis. on many fronts. Is some of it of his own making? Art, XLM, you're on the air with the Drudge Report.
I wanted to tell Trump, don't give up. Keep it simple. And no matter how unpopular the...
Oh, hold on. What does that mean, keep it simple?
Keep it simple?
Yeah, what is that? Specifically, that's not enough advice to save this situation. Keep it simple.
Well, I have a solution. I have one that really is about keeping it simple. The way you keep it simple is to follow, in strict fashion, the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution. Unfortunately, we see that Trump is not about that, and Drudge has been very quiet about the healthcare issue until recently. It's again because he doesn't want to paint a negative picture with respect to his chosen candidate. Now, folks, that is what we mean when we say here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, that we have allowed our system of polity to devolve into nothing short of a mere spectator sporting event. It's something that works against us each and every time. It deludes us and further distances and divorces ourselves from what truly matters in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And that of which I speak is our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. The fact that we've gotten away from that, and the fact that we've gotten away from the Constitution, is troubling. At the very least, it really is a very problematic development, and it's something that shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. And so that means that it's going to fall on our shoulders in our capacity as United States citizens to hold this government accountable. And yes, that means even the 45th president of these United States of America, Donald J. Trump himself. But that's part of the problem. That when you think about this, it's not just a few of the problems that have arisen within the first 60-some-odd days of the Trump administration that are of his own making. Rather, the vast majority of his shortcomings have been crafted by his own smally hand. This is something that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been attempting to warn you about over the past year and a little over 9 months now. Trump is his own worst enemy. And the sooner we come to this realization, the better able we will be to unite and push for the sort of change that is truly needed to get this nation back onto track and back to prosperity. Now, I fully realize that this is far easier said than done, but it must be done. These things are not going to resolve themselves. The other thing to keep in mind is that Trump has decided to go to war with the House Congressional Freedom Caucus. Now, folks, the House Congressional Freedom Caucus are, your main guys. They are your main conservative wing within the House of Representatives. And that's something to do that we have to do. Because if we don't, then it's going to be all the more difficult to overcome these hurdles, obstacles, and adversities that have been placed in our path. It's going to be that much more difficult to ensure that we protect our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights, as we are duty-bound to do by the clear and concise language of the preamble to our shared United States Constitution, because it says that we must secure the blessings of liberty unto ourselves and to our posterity. In other words, to the up-and-coming generations, and indeed those generations which have yet to be born. But in this era of instant gratification, and in this era of political expedience, it seems that we have lost sight of that. It seems that we have forgotten what it is to be the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in these United States of America. And that's due, thanks in no small part, to the meticulous and incessant efforts of the historical revisionists that occupy our ivory towers of academia from coast to coast and border to border. It's thanks to the graduates of Pavlov's School of Journalism for the salivating mainstream media, and to the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists. But it is also thanks to people like Michael Savage and Matt Drudge, who just wanted to overlook every problem with respect to the mafioso quafioso. They wanted to go out there and say that Trump is essentially the second coming of a mixture of Calvin Coolidge and Ronald Reagan. Of course, nothing, and I truly mean nothing, could be further from the truth. All of this is working to the great detriment of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. And again, this whole notion of Trump attacking the Congressional Freedom Caucus is something that just should be getting the blood boiling for all decent, hard-working, red-blooded American citizens. Because they are among the very people who helped usher Trump into office. Again, this doesn't matter to Trump because the only thing that he cares about is himself. That's the way that he has always been, and it shows, again, no signs of changing. When you attack your base's natural allies, this is going to work against you. It is going to undermine any credibility or any modicum of credibility that you once proclaimed that you might have. And we've seen this time and again, whether it was in the primary process where he turned to fake news to attack Texas Senator Ted Cruz and his family, or whether it was the Twitter storm that he had the first time against the Freedom Caucus, stating that they would ultimately harm the Republican message. Whatever it is, he has this willingness to do that. He has this just nonchalant attitude about going forth and attacking the Freedom Caucus that actually has done more than any part of the Republican Party within the legislative branch of government, other than the conservative senators like Mike Lee, Ben Sasse, and Texas Senator Ted Cruz, to stand up for our fundamental and inalienable rights, which were endowed to us by our Creator, who happens to be none other than the God of nature himself. You see, all of this plays into this chicanery, this political kabuki theater at its worst that the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has been foisting upon the American people and completely against their will. And again, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. But here's the thing. You know, the base didn't realize this would happen, but it's something that we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, certainly thought would happen. Trump is not a conservative. In fact, many of his followers are freely willing to admit this fact. It is one of those self-evident truths, folks. However, they try to justify his behavior by saying that Congress hasn't been doing anything for far too long now. The problem is, it's again not the Freedom Caucus who have been the obstructionists. Rather, it's the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, that has been engaged in this sort of conduct. They are the ones who are attempting to control the narrative from within D.C. to exponentially expand the power, scope, breadth, and influence of the federal government far beyond what our founding fathers ever originally intended for it to be. When we keep this in mind, then, we see how what Trump is attempting to do is nothing short of smoke and mirrors. Again, it's political kabuki theater at its absolute worst. And folks, we know that they will go out and continue to push a narrative of attacking conservatives. It's in a sense because conservatives are their favorite scapegoats, and Trump is making a problem for himself here. He is constructing a problem for himself by attacking the very ones who would support a lot of the promises that he made on the campaign trail. And that leads me to one inexorable conclusion, that Trump didn't mean a damn bit of what he had said all throughout the campaign and election. That it was all just a bunch of subterfuge in order to placate the base of the Republican Party to get them to support him. In other words, he doesn't care what he's done, or what he will be doing, or the fact that he's walked back the myriad of promises that he made all throughout the campaign trail. And that should be sending up the red flags and sounding off the alarm bells for decent, hardworking, red-blooded American citizens from coast to coast and border to border in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And just to give you an idea of this, as proof positive of what it is that we're seeing, it's not just Trump who's doing this. Speaker of the House Benedict Arnold Paul the Monkey Ryan has made a show of attacking the House Freedom Caucus as well. When he was asked about Trump's Twitter storm against the Freedom Caucus, Ryan attempted to belittle them, saying that the vast majority of Republicans were in support of the so-called American Health Care Act. And again, folks, this is just one of those things that won't go away. It's one of those things that has been coming to the epicenter time and again. But it's important that you hear this from Ryan himself, because, again, it shows exactly where the political alliances are lining up in the nation's capital at Washington, D.C. It shows how the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, is still continuing to attempt to lambast conservatives or to blame conservatives for any problem, when in fact these problems are of their own making. I mean, folks, you seriously cannot make this stuff up.
Not responding to all the president's tweets, but this is directly involved your conference saying of the Freedom Caucus, we must fight them in 2018. Sounds like he's calling for primaries or fighting. Do you agree with the assessment that you need to fight the Freedom Caucus to move his agenda?
I understand the president's frustration. I share frustration. About 90% of our conference is for this bill to repeal and replace Obamacare, and about 10% are not. And that's not enough to pass a bill. We're close. What I am encouraging our members to do is keep talking with each other until we can get the consensus to pass this bill. But it's very understandable that the president is frustrated that we haven't gotten to where we need to go, because this is something we all said we would do. And so he is just expressing his frustration. You all know that he does that in various forms, including Twitter. And I understand his frustration.
Look, you can understand his frustration all you want, Ryan, but the people that you should be worried about, the people whose frustration should be at the epicenter of your mind throughout all of this, are the American people. And again, he was being completely intellectually disingenuous there, saying that this was the promise that they had made. No, the promise was to completely overturn the so-called Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And you see, again, this is just part of what the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has become. They have become, essentially, the Me Too party of socialism. They have embraced all of this chicanery. They say one thing, and then once they have the grips on the reins of political power, they go out and do something else entirely. This is the sort of betrayal that has alienated huge swaths of the American electorate. And it is only going to get worse because, again, over the course of the past 7 years, they have been promising a complete repeal. Then they amended the language to become repeal and replace. Now it's fix and amend. All of this is designed to bamboozle the American people. They're going to claim that they can't do the conservative thing. They lie about what has to be done through quote-unquote archaic rules in the Senate. Again, it's really not that way. Texas Senator Ted Cruz had pointed out that there's a 1973 law that would allow it to go through via the Senate parliamentarian. We've discussed that on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. So all of this is subterfuge. All of this is lying. All of this is to claim that they can't do this. And it's not that they can't, it's that they won't. It's that they lack the political wherewithal, the political cojones to go forth and do what is necessary to actually fulfill the great myriad and plethora of campaign promises that they've made in the 4 past successive election cycles. You see, folks, all of this comes back to the epicenter. All of this comes back to fully demonstrate that the Republican Party is not acting within the best interests of their base and core constituency. And that is a problem that we have seen for decade after successive decade. And Paul Ryan and Donald Trump, they are walking hand in hand down the idiot brick road on this, trying to bamboozle us again, trying to make us think that they're really out there for us. But no, that's not it. That's not it at all. It's that they have been untruthful. They have been intentionally lying to the American people. And whenever you have that come to the forefront, you are acting in a way that is diametrically opposed to the best interests of this republic. You are acting in a way that is infuriating to people. And you would have thought, having witnessed the way that the 2016 election cycle unfurled, that they would have recognized that this anger that is felt by the American people is a real and genuine anger. It's not something that is just going to fall by the wayside. It's not something that's going to be swept under the rug. It's not something that can be ignored. Now, they're going to do their damnedest to ignore it. That's certainly what Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan and the 45th President of these United States of America are attempting to do, because they don't want to address it. They don't believe it. You see, it falls back to this sort of elitist mentality that really doesn't show any form of differentiation or distinguishment between Madam Clinton and Trumple. And the reason it doesn't is because they both think and they both operate from this erroneous belief that they know what's best. But when you look at the original intent, the foundational image that our founding fathers had conjured for this nation at its inception some 235 plus years ago, you'll see that this is completely detached, diametrically opposed to what our founding fathers wanted. We, the people, are the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. And unless and until we get back to that, unless and until we truly, holistically embrace that, these problems are only going to be exacerbated. We're only going to continue to see this trail worsen, and it is only going to strip and deprive and abridge and encroach upon our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. And as Jeremy and I have so oft times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, without our rights, we are truly left with nothing. There's no way around this simple and self-evident truth, folks. The government is not acting at your behest. Sure, they're going to pay lip service to it. They're going to claim that they are. They're going to try and make it appear as though that is what they are doing, but nothing, and I mean truly nothing, could be further from the truth. And so when we awaken to that, when we make that realization, that is when we can put our foot down and say enough is enough. But it is going to require that we stand shoulder to shoulder in solidarity and unity, and that we do hold our elected officials as well as each other accountable for our words, deeds, and actions. That is what it means to be a self-responsible and self-accountable people, and thereby a self-determinate people. So what we see with Ryan's little line there is he attempted to state that the Freedom Caucus only represents 10% of Congress. It's not about Congress per se. Rather, it's about the respective constituents. This bill only has 17% approval among the American electorate. That is an unimaginably abysmal number. That's not even anywhere near to having majority support. Yet the GOP is determined to keep the federal government involved with one of the most private and intimate aspects of the facets of our daily lives, our health care. The truth of the matter is, these problems were all foreseeable. We knew that Trump has stated on numerous occasions that he wants universal health care or socialized medicine. It is nothing short of socialized medicine. This is not a conservative position, and it goes against the vast majority of the campaign promises he made all throughout the election. Again, not only was it the election cycle of betrayal, but we are now also living in the post-truth era. Now, Ryan and Trump are attempting to accomplish something that the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, has never been able to do before. We know that the little orange Johnny Boehner cried into his drink and complained that he couldn't work with the conservatives. It wasn't that he couldn't work with them. It's that he didn't want to. It's that they want to eviscerate the House Freedom Caucus. They want to destroy the will of the American people because, again, it comes back to this air of arrogance that surrounds them, that they know what's best, that they understand things, and that we, the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, are just a bunch of bumpkins and rubes who have no idea how our system of polity works. Poppycock. Those that have been forwarding that agenda, those who have been, thrusting that down the throats of the American people completely against their will, all need to go straight to hell. Because they are not looking out for you. They are not representing your interests. They are two-faced liars. And that truly is what they are. That is truly the way they act. That is truly what they believe to be the case. And yet nothing could be further from the truth. They're not that wise. They're not that brilliant. They are not a cut above us. And the Constitution absolutely prohibits them from making such an assumption. We have no nobility in the United States, but that's what Trump's trying to create. That's what Benedict Arnold Paul Ryan is trying to create. This is the nonsense that they want to foist and cram down our throats. Well, enough is enough. It really is. It is high past time that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, say enough is enough, that we are not going to tolerate this from either one of the mainstay political parties. Because again, when they operate in such a fashion, and when they act with such carte blanche against our best interests, it is all designed to benefit them. It's all designed to exponentially increase the power, breadth, and scope, as well as influence of the federal government, again, well past what our founding fathers ever originally intended for it to be. And so long as they keep doing that, it's only going to get worse. The American people are only going to get more and more fed up with it. They're going to take a look at what is happening within the body politique of this country and realize that both parties, both of the mainstay political parties, have essentially become the flip side of the same titular coin. Now, I wish this wasn't the case. I wish that I had words of comfort and solace to convey unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members, as I sit here speaking into this microphone, delivering this message to you, but no such words come to the forefront. And the reason they don't is because we see that these dark and twisted machinations are continuing to be utilized against us. They are not interested in actually overturning Obamacare. They see this as a way to keep the coffers of the government filled in perpetuity. In other words, limitlessly, timelessly. Well, no, that's not how this system of polity works. And part of the point with respect to what Ryan was attempting to do here, that shows just how untruthful he is we know from the 2014 midterm elections that conservatives do win. But they always have tried to proclaim that the conservative faction lacks the ability to win elections. Bovine excrement. Despite the fact that we've seen the evidence directly contradicting them, it doesn't matter. Nonetheless, Trump and Ryan are determined to ignore this self-evident truth. And folks, what's happening here is that they are again attempting to make conservatives be their scapegoats. That is their favorite thing. Remember that Karl Rove tried to do that with respect to the conservatives. Oh, well, you know, they lost in 2008 and they couldn't get enough in 2012, so he tried to sabotage them in 2014. It didn't matter. Look at Brad, who went in Virginia. He's part of the Freedom Caucus. He's part of the very ones that Trump is attacking, that Ryan is attacking. All of this is inexcusable. All of this speaks volumes about the contempt at which the detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, holds the American people with. Instead of realizing that they are there to represent our will, our hopes, dreams, and future aspirations in our capacity as the true ultimate wielders of sovereignty, as United States citizens, no, they're thumbing their noses at us. They're looking at us with contempt. They view us as nothing short of useful idiots to be serenaded during election cycle after successive election cycle and then disregarded all the rest of the time. Is it any wonder then that huge swaths of the American electorate have become so disenfranchised with this entire system? Of course not. It's no shock at all. It's no surprise at all. This is what happens when you have a political movement which is so disconnected from, so divorced from the base of the party that they will do everything in their power to ignore the will of the people. Because in their mind, that's okay. In their mind, that's what's necessary. But again, nothing could be further from the truth. All of that is going to work to the great detriment of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people. And unless and until we begin to truly address that, unless and until we finally put our foot down and say enough is enough and reiterate that monosyllabic, almost universally two-letter word, almost universally understood two-letter word of no, they are going to sit back and think that they have carte blanche to continue with this chicanery, to continue with the smoke and mirrors and the carnival parlor tricks. But enough is enough. We have had it. We're not going to put up with it. And here's the thing. They want to blame conservatives because deep down they hate conservatives more than they do the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftist-controlled Democrat Party. Again, this is all part of their plan to further divide us. They want us to feel dejected and demoralized. For that reason, we have to be more willing now than ever to stand up for our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Otherwise, these nefarious forces will continue to undermine the conservative movement from within, and that's exactly what they're trying to do. That's exactly what they are promoting. It is all designed to try and strip and deprive us of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. It's all done in a way that is intellectually disingenuous because they know if they went out there and truthfully proclaimed it in the form and fashion that they truly desire it, that it would be rejected wholesale. And one of the things that we always hear is how they complain that there are so few American citizens who actually actively participate in the electoral process. Well, a lot of that has to do with the fact that they feel they're not being represented. We've got to get past that. Now, more than ever, it is absolutely imperative that we foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. Because in so doing, we empower ourselves to stand up to this chicanery. We empower ourselves to say enough is enough and no, you can't do this. You don't have the power to do it. We understand our rights, and you, who are attempting to abridge those rights, belittle those rights, encroach upon those rights, you can go straight to hell. That's what it is going to take. That is the type of commitment that it is going to take to ensure that we secure the blessings of liberty unto ourselves and unto the up-and-coming generation, as well as those generations which have yet to be born. I know, that's a lofty obligation. You know, the tragedy is, despite this, there are still far too many in America who are willing to overlook this. They just want to be complacent. And it's as the great visionary Zygmunt Dobbs warned in his magnum opus of Keynes at Harvard back in the 1950s and 60s, that essentially what we have happening here is that there is this movement by the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists to use the dark and twisted game of semantics to further confuse the American people, all the while piling up these overzealous and draconian regulations, making it all the more difficult for the American people to sustain the standard and quality of life that they've grown accustomed to. And basically what that means is that they drain us of energy and of political capital, meaning the ability to stay abreast of current events as they occur, and it just leads us astray. It takes us away from that which is important. It allows us to break down into disparate and competing factions. And again, that reminds me, as I have so oft times reiterated on previous episodes of Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, of the sagacious warning handed down to us by the father of our nation, George Washington, in his 1796 farewell address. He implored the American people not to allow themselves to break down into competing and disparate factions, because in so doing we would lose sight of that which is truly the overarching important issue: maintaining our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights as are safeguarded by the clear and concise language of our shared United States Constitution. All of this plays into what is happening now. We know that the ivory towers of education from border to border and coast to coast are disregarding all of these important things. We know that Donald Trump is trying to have the government intrude upon the most intimate aspects or facets of our daily lives, all in an effort to have some sort of populist drivel thrusted upon us, when what we should be doing is going back to strict adherence to the Constitution at all levels of government. You know, we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been reiterating this point almost to the point of it becoming ad nauseum since the airing of our premiere episode on September 11th of 2015, because it is that important. Because we have allowed ourselves to be pushed aside. We have allowed the government to operate in a holistic fashion that is directly opposed to all that we hold near and dear in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And again, folks, it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future, unless and until we, in our capacity as United States citizens, begin taking the steps that are necessary to restore American prosperity, to spark an American renaissance. How do we do that when we don't know? And when we have elected officials who seemingly don't know what made us great and prosperous in the first place? Well, we do it by picking up the pieces for ourselves, moving forth as is necessary to foster that fluent and working knowledge and understanding of our shared United States Constitution and thereby our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. We do whatever is necessary to spread the word of the Constitution because, again, that is our duty, obligation, but above all, responsibility in our capacity as United States citizens. And when we disregard that, and when we do everything within our power to distance and divorce ourselves from that, or to bow down to this tyranny of a false, this tyranny of false unity, it just works against us. Each and every time. You see, the fundamental pillars of the American society is self-accountability and self-responsibility working in tandem, thereby delivering unto us self-determination. That is how we reached such lofty heights in our relatively brief yet illustrious history here on God's green earth. But when we forget that, and when we discard that or disregard that, it is going to haunt us each and every time without fail. And so it does require that we be proactive in the maintenance and safeguarding of our fundamental and inalienable God-given rights. But the problem is, so many are believing that Trump is looking out for their best interests. And they have become convinced that the Freedom Caucus isn't really conservative. Again, this is playing in to that dark and twisted game of semantics that the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists utilize all the time. Again, this is an attempt to strip and deprive us of our rights and to convince us that the sky is purple when in fact, as we all know, it is blue. It's tragic that it's come to this, but that is the danger of a cult of personality. And during that disastrous debacle and fiasco known as the 2016 presidential election cycle, we truly did bear witness to a rise of a cult of personality rivaling that of Barack Hussein Obama in both 08 and 12 in the Republican side, on the right side of the political spectrum. It's just as dangerous, irrespective of which side it hails from. But again, this is one of those things that Matt Drudge said during that interview with Savage. And what he said was that he felt Congress was working against Trump. Poor Trump. Trump is taking all of this on his quaff by himself, working without the support of those who should really be behind him, and therefore Congress is working against the will of the people. I don't know where the hell he comes up with this. I'll tell you what is really working against the American people. It's this notion of the detente wings just divisive ideology here of working against the best interests of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty, we the people, trying to make them bow down under the centralized, dare I say, near tyrannical authority of the 45th President of these United States. No, we are a republic. We're not some damn oligarchy. But that's what they're working to create. That is what they are attempting to foist upon us, and completely against our will. Well, enough is enough. This is tiresome. This goes beyond the pale. This works against us each and every time, and it shows no signs of improving within the foreseeable future. But again, Trump is only going to make matters worse for himself. He is the one that erected these problems in his path. He is the one that created them, and then goes on to the arena of social media and his favorite avenue of it, the Twitter sphere, to lambast and attack dyed-in-the-wool constitutional compositionists. In other words, those who want to see strict adherence to the clear and concise language contained within the four corners of our shared United States Constitution at all levels of government. That is the unfortunate truth that we must awaken to both as a nation and people, because it shows no signs of improving. They are going to double down on this because they think they have carte blanche to do so. So, all of this stuff that was said by Drudge is a load of bunk. The detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, sees this as just another opportunity to attack their true ideological foes, true dyed-in-the-wool constitutional compositionists. That's what it comes down to, folks. It's not about anything else. They are not working to do anything else. And this was the danger that we were most concerned about when the Trump faction managed to clinch the nomination and ultimately the election. Jeremy has always said that we know how to fight Hillary Clinton because she is a frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist, leftist. In the case of Trump, it's much more difficult because he's now a part of our party. You see, he's attempting to redefine what conservatism is. Remember, he said that he wanted it to become a workers' party? Folks, that's National Socialism that he's pushing for. It's National Socialism that we find in the so-called American Health Care Act. And again, they're dabbling in that dark and twisted game of semantics to try and make it sound better than what it is, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. What they're doing is literally undermining all that we have worked for throughout the past several successive generations to try and build. So the frothing-at-the-mouth Fabian socialist leftists can just sit back and watch this show unfurl before our eyes, because it is unfurling like a poorly scripted reality television program. We have allowed it to become shock and awe, flash, sparkle, and pedantics, as opposed to the lofty ideals and philosophies that propelled this nation to such lofty heights in her relatively brief yet illustrious history here on God's green earth. I wish that there was something that I could say that would be uplifting about this, but that would be intellectually disingenuous on my part. That would be ignoring the self-evident fundamental truths that are rising to the surface as I sit here speaking into this microphone, conveying this message unto you, our cherished listening passengers and audience members. And we can't do that. We must remain dedicated to the truth, because as Scripture says, ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set ye free. Why are we moving away from that? Why have we embraced this as the post-truth era? People like Matt Drudge, people like Michael Savage, people like Rush Limbaugh, and even to a lesser extent, Mark Levin, people like Laura Inkampf et al., they must be held accountable for refusing to vet Trump, for refusing to speak out about the great plethora of things that he has done, the great litany of statements that he made in the past that he is now living up to. This whole notion of it's not the Conservative Party, it's the Republican Party. Why were they not out on a limb condemning that as it so rightly deserves to be condemned? Where the hell were they? Why were they sitting on their thumbs when it comes to something that they've been preaching about over the course of decades? Folks, we cannot afford to ignore this. We cannot allow this to come to fruition. We cannot allow it to continue to go forth unchallenged, because the moment that we do that is the moment that we turn our backs on all that we hold near and dear, all that our political movement is founded upon. Again, folks, it does not behoove us to ignore these things. It does not work towards our betterment to sit back and think that a tyranny of false unity or buying into this notion of voting for the lesser of two evils is somehow going to allow us to regroup and allow us to place this nation back onto track, because we see from the great weight of the evidence, and when we observe and analyze that evidence with a modicum of objectivity, that this never plays out in that form or fashion, that it plays out to our great detriment each and every time. Again, that's just one of those self-evident truths that continues to rise to the surface, continues to fully demonstrate itself. And again, it literally is going to require that we, in our capacity as United States citizens, put our collective foot down and say enough is enough. That we are not going to bow down to this, that we are not going to allow these things to continue to operate to our great detriment. That's what it means to be self-determinate. That is ultimately what it means to be a true ultimate wielder of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours. But we've got to get back to it. We do. It means we've got to stop moving the goalposts. It means we've got to stop deluding ourselves into thinking that just because a candidate says all the right things, that means they're going to do it. No, wrong. That's not how it works. But here's the thing. This whole notion of Congress working against Trump, that's another conspiracy theory. It's a grand conspiracy theory to try and destroy Trump. That's what they think. No, the conspiracy theory is that everybody who speaks out against Trump is somehow, through this binary lining of thought, are leftists. You know, it's a load of bunk. The detente wing of the gutless opposition party, or GOP, sees this as just another opportunity to attack their true ideological foes, we the people. But you know what? When they try and say, particularly the media, that all conservatives are doing is barking. They have all bark and no bite. They are all talk and no action. Yet, it's funny. It's this whole notion that we're obstructionists. That's what they like to think of us as. That's how they want this message to be touted and thrown out there. Look, when the action that is being proposed makes things worse than they were before, then that is an action that should not rightly be taken. I don't consider that obstruction. I consider that doing their civic duty, obligation, and responsibility. I consider that standing up for the position and the hopes, dreams, and future aspirations of their respective constituents who placed them into their office. Why is this not discussed? Why is it that the so-called right-wing punditry and commensurate has been ignoring this? Not all. Not all of them have. Glenn Beck's talked about it. Michael Berry's talked about it. James Parker, the local host here in Waco, Texas, has talked about it. But for the rest of them, oh, give me an ever-loving break. They are waving their pom-poms, spreading the orange Cheeto-flavored makeup over their face to try and do some sort of vaudevillian act to bamboozle their listening audience. And in a way, when you think back to that first caller that Drudge said, "You're not giving him enough advice. You'll just keep it simple." He's not keeping it simple. He is complicating things. He is shooting himself and, by extension, his political party in the foot. And that is what it's come down to. That is the chicanery that has risen to the surface in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic and vibrant community of popular sovereigns of ours. And it is despicable. It's disgusting. It's something that we shouldn't be tolerating. It's something that we shouldn't be embracing. Why on earth would we consider this to be in our best interest, both as a nation and people? Because when we look at it with a modicum of objectivity, we can see that absolutely nothing could be further from the truth. But unfortunately, folks, that's where we are. It's where we are. You know, this is just their attempt to attack us. It is their attempt to push us further aside. And so, the conservative movement once intrinsically understood that you stood up to these things, that you prevented actions that were detrimental to the Constitution. Now, however, we are divided, and that's helping the frothing at the mouth Fabian socialist leftists achieve their overarching propagandist goals and agenda. This means that we now have to fight multiple sides as opposed to merely the left. Those who are diehard supporters of the 45th President of the United States didn't count on this. However, we saw it coming. Now, some are attempting to proclaim that we have to accept this outcome because it's a lesser of two evils. That's not true at all. Again, this just further demonstrates how misguided that belief set is and how it actually works to undermine the American system of polity overall. Now, folks, while all of this is going on, Trump's immigration agenda is in flames. And isn't that funny? Because that is something that we too here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, have been predicting all along. Remember, he said that he was going to build a wall and then Mexico was going to pay for it. How in the hell do we force a sovereign nation to pay for that? Oh, well, we'll put tariffs, protectionist tariffs on their imported goods. Well, that means that we, the American people and consumers, are going to have to pay for it, and prices are already skyrocketing. So much for the greatly businessman, so much for his straightening things out, so much for him revitalizing America and putting America first. Go to hell. Problem is, we've allowed the cult of personality to set root. And therefore, we're going to keep moving the goalposts. Nothing can be his fault, and if any negativity does come forth, if any negativity does come to the surface, then it has to be fake news. Nothing can ever be the fault of the mafioso quafioso himself. You know, folks, that's no different than what Barack Hussein Obama did. That was no different than what we encountered throughout the two disastrous terms of the Barack Hussein Obama regime, and it is just repeating itself. It's why we here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer, said that Trump might very well be a third Obama term. Well, that's how it's playing out. Sure seems to be how it's playing out anyway, and, you know, it's interesting. It's being said that the funding for the fabled border wall won't be forthcoming at any time in the near future. Of course, all talk about forcing Mexico to pay for the wall is off the table. That makes sense because we have no legal standing to force a sovereign nation to do that unless we've declared war and won. And the tariffs that Trump loves so much will come back on the American consumer. This is a lose-lose situation, no matter how you look at it. It is working against us, both as a nation and people, all along, and that is what my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton, has tried to tell you. It's what our first Air Marshal, Mr. Nelson Ward, has attempted to tell you, and it's certainly what I've attempted to tell you as well. So now, more than ever, we are going to have to be responsible. We are going to have to be willing to hold our elected officials' feet to the fire because they have been working to the great detriment of the true ultimate wielders of popular sovereignty in this once thriving and flourishing representative republic of ours, we the people, all along. You know, when Ryan went out there and said that The Freedom Caucus only made up 10% of the Congress or whatever the hell it was. He was essentially going out there saying that their constituents who put them into office didn't matter. That is ignoring the true tenets of federalism. You know, the proper relationship between the federal government and the governments of the several states. Why do we ignore that balance? Why do we allow this to come to fruition each and every time? Because every time it does play out like that, it works to our great detriment. We can't just keep going forth with that. But you know, with Trump aligning himself with the detente wing of the Gutless Opposition Party, or GOP, he is essentially throwing his so-called immigration reform efforts under the bus. And again, that's just par for the course with him. Being consistently inconsistent, being the man that he has always been. There is no change in Trump. Trump is not acting differently than he ever has. It's all about him. And it's all ever just been about him. And so we see that it has come to fruition once again. We see that it works to our great detriment once again. And we see that it's all part of an ongoing effort to drastically, fundamentally, and dare I say irreparably redefine conservatism in this country. They want it to be populist-based. They want it to be that we are looking now to somehow basically embrace the big government operating against our best interests, both as a nation and people, and that we should just accept it because, you know, what's wrong with the government taking care of us from cradle until grave, other than the fact that it is completely diametrically opposed to that foundational image that our founding fathers had conjured up at the inception of this nation some 235 plus years ago. Folks, we are going to have to stand our ground. We cannot just allow this to come to fruition. We cannot allow them to move forward with carte blanche and think that there will be no repercussions and no ramifications for what they have done. Because again, all of that works to our great disadvantage. Now, with that said, it is time for us to begin our descent. I'm going to go ahead and send the flight attendant back with one last round of alcohol. Folks, she is not making problems for herself unless she tells you that she won't pour her the alcohol, in which case you have our permission to push her out of the plane. As always, folks, I'm your Captain, Randy Wright, and I want to thank you for tuning in to the Wright Flyer. Should you have any questions, comments, concerns, or even topic suggestions, I invite you to leave them either in the comment section here on our YouTube page, or on our Google Plus page, or even our Facebook page. And on top of this, I invite you to follow us on Twitter with the Twitter handle @RadioAviationEX. One more time, folks, that's @RadioAviationEX. And there you will find the departure board that lists my personal Twitter account, the personal Twitter account of my first officer, Jeremy Grapenton. You will find the Blogspot account that is just chock full of useful information. You will find also the Cafe Press account, just as you will in the description section of today's Solo Flight Special Edition of our state-of-the-art radio program. Folks, at the Cafe Press account, we have all sorts of novelty items, trinkets, and goodies, either with our original Radio Aviation Excellence logo, or our first-class passenger logo, or even the two Uplifting America logos, one of which we use to start every program. That logo right there. And if you haven't already done so, please do subscribe. All subscribers are welcome here at Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. We do these programs for you. We couldn't do the shows without you, and we appreciate all of your input. And we hope to see you again next time. Please do. Take care.